Okay, it's 5 a.m. in South Africa. Manu, how are you feeling and what do you expect from today?
I'm feeling good. Had a good night's sleep, and really, I'm also grateful that you guys could make it. And what I expect is that we continue on what we're doing, and always seeking the practicality and how to live with the current environment and create and apply ideas and things that we have, put them in practice. Like Richard was talking just a few seconds ago, a few minutes ago. How do we use that to help around and to create a better world for all? That's my expectation. It's never, and Steve said something important, owning the past and creating the future today. And that's to me is very resonating. So that's what I expect. Richard, how do you feel? What do you expect?
Well, I feel pretty good. As I said earlier, it's been quite a week. Started out with the receipt of a publication from the Perry Institute in Italy that had the article that my daughter and I wrote in it, and it's called Perspectives. And most people would think of it as being like a news magazine or a newsletter from an organization. Well, this one's more like a book. It was 186 pages. um, some really deep sort of thinking articles in it, all the way from consciousness issues to Jungian issues to um, uh, the paranormal issues, which is what these member contributions were all about. To say, have you had some kind of strange coincidence happen sometime in your life? And members were invited to send in their stories, and a lot did, and a lot were published. So that was a good start. And then I talked to a new colleague in Costa Rica. He's a Canadian, but he's now takes the winters in Costa Rica, and he's a eco climate kind of guy. Talked with another person the other morning who is very upset, and I'm on his side about the medical aid in medical assistance in dying. And I've been a bit of a critic, not so much of the concept, but of the imbalance between having sort of what I call suicide safer assistance in living. Um, in other words, SAIL instead of MAID, or SAIL to go along with MAID, so that there is a balance between those who want to end their life in a medically assisted, supportive way, and those who want to get rid of the issues that are compounding them to the point where they think they should take their life, but they would rather live. And and then I actually had a call from a colleague in one of these kinds of meetings that we have, and is um, perplexed by a very serious radical surgery issue that is putting that live or die uh, balance in the forefront. Um, and I've been on some sessions with people who have had personal lived experience with suicide, and talking about the criticism of the way the clinical world treats them, or doesn't treat them, and not giving them voice to tell their story. They would rather um, assume their expertise and direct you somewhere. And so that's a real slam on the kind of history that I've grown up in, as, if you want, as a clinical caring person. So it hurts um, personally to hear that kind of criticism, but it's also a fact. It's more true than it is not true. And these things need to be changed. So I've had all of this week. So it's good to be in this company and be able to talk about things that we talk about. And they always seem to have a spin-off on practical application sides of things. But it gives me a bit of a retreat in terms of being able to talk through some of these issues at the level that we do here. So that's kind of what I want to get out of today. And so, Joe, how are you feeling, and what's your expectations for the day?
I'm feeling really good. I'm a little bit scared about something. I'm not going to go into great detail about, but just I have a friend that's just I'm concerned about, and so I think that everything will be okay. But there's just a period of healing that has to go on. So that was that, but I'm doing pretty well outside of that. So I'm excited to be here. I know I missed the past couple of weeks. And it really did it means a lot to be around you guys. So it's not like I just missed Saturday, I missed Wednesday. So I'm feeling pretty good. I actually outside of that cough and things are moving in the right direction for me. And so I really feel that way. So that's and I'm sorry. As far as my check-in, or not check, my expectation is, I really am starting to see a lot of Bucky's concepts more clearly. Using cosmic accounting as an example earlier in the week. And also just the project that we went through, the phases, the different phases, if you want to call it a project, a comprehensive approach, was helpful in seeing how well thought out Bucky's ideas are thorough is probably a better way of saying it. So I'm excited to see what's next in the book. I didn't read ahead, but that's going to be part of the excitement of being here with you guys. We'll learn it together. Steve, how you feeling? What are your expectations for today?
Oh, thanks for sharing. And I'm wearing my collegiate readers. Usually I have my doctoral readers. These are more, I feel a little bit weird wearing them. They're my last resort. I can't find my good ones. It's really an honor to be here and to share what's going on with this book, Critical Path. It amazes me. Here's a guy who probably Buckminster Fuller could have been an architect and could have made money, but he decided to make sense. He says you can either make money or make sense, and I think it's polar. I think it's a dual. And then spent the last of his life concerned about the human condition, about the giant ripoff of resources. I don't know if you guys have heard lately, but in Netherlands and Africa and India particularly, farmers are protesting all over the world about the fact they're not being paid to produce the food. And I had a farmer brother-in-law who complained constantly because the brokers were making more money than he was raising the food, and that he would go in the hole and have to get a loan in order to plant the next crop while the brokers made tons of money. And this distribution of human resource has just been a constant issue. And I think that in some ways, Bucky would be very happy to be alive today. And in some ways, he's rolling over in his grave because everything he said, it's worse than it was. It's in some ways it's better than it was, and in many ways it's worse than it was. I mean, poverty is at its lowest scale, and at least they report, this is what I've heard, in the history of human beings. More people are not impoverished than ever before. And yet, looking at the systems and looking at the institutions and looking at the way people surrender their sovereignty over to institutions that have been captured, it boggles my mind. And this book is a constant reminder of that. Just as an overview, we're going to start on page 27 to 276 today. The book the book itself, or I don't know how exactly the right terminology here, but the book ends on page 347, which is 70 pages away, and then the appendices begin. And the first appendix is 30 pages long, and the second appendix is 32 pages long. And the appendices tend to approach the chronophiles, the chronological events in human progress that Bucky has been citing as references in this book. So those of you who want to, I invite you to look ahead in the appendices and see how you want to cover it. I mean, we could skim through 30 pages, or we could read those 30 pages of each of the appendices, 62 pages, page by page. Normally, we go from anywhere from 3 pages to 13 or 14 pages are set per session. So, if we did it, it would take 2 of our meetings on the first appendix, assuming we did 15 pages at a time, and maybe 3 days, assuming that we broke it up and had more of a discussion about the significance of each of those events he outlines, and then ditto with the second appendices. So that would be 2 to 3 days. So there's 4 to 6 days doing the appendices, and if we do imagine 10 pages, we have about 7 more days left at 10 pages average to finish off the book. So I thought I'd present that overview. You guys look ahead and you see how we want to do it. That's fine with me. I'm just looking forward to see more of the insights that Bucky had and feel some of the frustrations that he had at the time. So any comments or questions on anything I've just said?
Just one thing that I didn't say in terms of my
Thank you.
introduction. What's starting to happen for me is, and especially related to Bucky, and if you want the turnaround in his life and what he did with it afterwards, I'm getting a little addled, I guess, about all the attention that's being given to regenerative regenerative agriculture, regenerative food growing. Everything is regenerative, except there's almost total silence in that sort of domain, if you want, on regenerative living. And that's what I'm beginning to sort of say is what suicide prevention and suicide recovery is all about. It's regenerative living. And when you anchor it back to Bucky in 1927, that's exactly what his life modeled, a regeneration of what he was up until that point into something that kind of turned the corner for him. And obviously the way we read his work and others read it, he turned the corner for, well, in that sense, he was a true Tim Tab, because he also helped turn our ship, the rudders that we kind of might symbolize. His trim tab movement also turned our ships, our bigger ships. So That's just a frustration that's starting to surface more so in recent weeks than ever had in my life. And it's partly because I end up in discussions like this with people who really know and care and think about the impact of Bucky Fuller on themselves and on society, and most other people that I associate with um, really think that Bucky Fuller is some kind of peripheral thing that I'm obsessed with. So anyway, that's just kind of a bit of a pickup on what you were saying, Steve, in terms of um, the way in which we pay attention to doing things in a way that can be helpful rather than making them worse.
Well, and this may be obvious, but it wasn't obvious to me, and it's a very subtle but very powerful insight, Richard, as I pondered your experience and what you just said about Bucky. I mean, to put a point on it, here's a guy who considered suicide. I mean, this guy was going to paddle out into Lake Michigan or wherever it was and allow himself to drown. He was going to exhaust himself and allow himself to drown. And that suicidal, it wasn't just a thought. I mean, he was rigged and ready to roll. And as he stood there on the beach, began to ponder what was going on, and he made a life-changing decision. So that, I mean, it's easy for people just to, it's been easy for me just to not consider that as a critical part of critical path. And when he says critical path, it's life and freaking death. And he made a choice. And you, honestly, Richard, I'm so grateful for you taking, being on these calls, taking your time to be on these calls, because every time I talk with you, I get more and more of that intuitive kind of grounded sense of reality about this life or death thing. And I know a lot of people who have I've been in therapy groups. I was educated. I completed education to be certified as a clinical hypnotherapist. And I've been in years, for 5 years, I was involved in therapy groups with people who had really no reason to live. They did not have a place on this planet. And I talked to them. And then you bring this thing and remind me of all this. It's really this idea of regenerative living, this idea of the respect for each sovereign individual, and the fact that each sovereign person is important to make a contribution. I was just having a conversation, geez, I'm on a rant here, but I was talking with someone about how if I'm building the kingdom of God, and if the kingdom of God is within me, then it's important for me to build me. A lot of people think the kingdom is out there somewhere, that I'm supposed to dedicate my resources to do that. No, I'm dedicating my resources to be exactly who I am. And if I don't do that, I'm not respecting my DNA. Now, I can be a religious person or not, but I'm a unique being in the universe. And to throw myself away and not be fully who I am and experience the full measure of my creation is violent. It violates God. It violates a higher power. It violates the universe. If I'm an atheist, it violates the universe for me not to be me, and for me not to create a space for others to be exactly who they are and find out who that is. So I'm having trouble with words, and I feel like I'm kind of on a rant, but this idea of suicide, this idea of regeneration, this idea of the critical path is not just a book about economy. And maybe I'm complete with that. So thank you, Richard, for your insight. Any other comments or questions before we just open up this book and jump in? Okay. Part of me wants to apologize for my rant. So, but that's me being me. And of course, that's what I'm here to do, right? Is to be me. So, okay. So, this is where we actually read this paragraph right here last week, but I think it's a good place to start this week. It's a good context to start. Oh, by the way, I got an email from Anne, who said that she was traveling this weekend and couldn't be here, and I did get a decline from John. So he told me he wouldn't be here. So great. So I like the idea of rotating reading again. If you guys are okay with that, and if you don't want to read, say pass, and it's not, that's fine. And then if you do read, let's have each person read 3 paragraphs, or about a 2/3 of a page or whatever, and let's go from there. Who knows they're the first reader tonight? Okay, Joe. Whoop, we had Manu raised his hand a split second. Manu, you're second. Joe, you're first. Manu, you're second.
No, Manu, go first.
You're going to let Manu go first. Okay, good. Manu, do you care to read them?
Okay. Okay. We may safely assume that class 1 evolution is syntropic and that class 2 is often entropically diseased. The drive to make money is inherently
Can we
entropic.
stop and pause and talk about that for just a little bit, Manu? Because Susan was big on this class 1, or she called it type 1, class 1 evolution and class 2 evolution. And we've been reading about that all along. Let's summarize what that is, because that's going to set up this next paragraph. We safely assume that class 1 evolution is syntropic and class 2 evolution is entropically diseased. So what is class 1 evolution and what is class 2 evolution? I have opinions on that, but who can speak definitively? Anybody want to offer a definition?
Well,
Why don't we go back to the definition that Bucky had, because he defined that very clear.
Okay.
You have it, Steve?
Well, I don't know that I have it. I have it underlined in the book somewhere.
Very critical path. Let me see.
If I recall, class 1 evolution is human evolution before technology, and class 2 is human evolution after technology. After tools and implements. So that's what I remember. What does anybody else remember? I found on page 237.
Class 1 and class 2?
Yeah.
I think there was a proper definition of class 1 evolution and class 2 evolution.
Yeah, page 230. Page 230. Yeah, here's page 230, class 1 evolution. So maybe we can.
What was the page, Steve?
Page 230.
229 it starts on. It's all the class
Yeah,
1.
he does start. He does mention that. Let's go ahead and find that, okay, you guys? I'm going to go ahead and go for that. That's page 229. I'm going to look here for page 229. And let's just, because I would like to be clear, if we're going to get more on this, here we go, critical path. Oh, in fact, I even highlighted them because of our discussion. So let's read these.
Okay. Class 2 evolutionary trendings are all those events that seem to be resultant upon H.
Oh, shoot, sorry. Okay, good. I gotta put my cursor in there so when I do this.
Okay.
Okay, my cursor's in there. Go ahead.
Class 2 evolutionary trendings are all those events that seem to be resultant upon human initiative taking or political reform that adjust to the change wrought by the progressive introduction of environment altering artifact.
Yeah.
All of the class 2 evolutionary events tend to flatter human ego and persuade humanity to deceive itself by taking credit for favorable changing in circumstances, like blaming others, other human, or acts of God for unfavorable changes. It therefore assumes that humanity is running the universe, wherefore, if its power structure leader decides that it is valid to crash in all of nature's available riches to further enrich the present rich, or to protect them militarily from attacks by the assumed enemies, all of the costs of terminating human presence, all at the cost of terminating human presence on planet Earth. That is power structure. That is power structure leaders' divine privilege. All class 1 evolutionary trending is utterly transcendental to any human vision, planning, manipulation, or corruption. Class 1 evolution accounts for human presence on Earth. It accounts for their having always been born naked, helpless for months, and inexperienced, ego ignorant, hungry, thirsty, curious, and therefore fitted to learn how to survive only through trial and error one, progressive accumulation of experience. Class 1 evolution accounts for humanity's all unexpected invention of verbal oral sound communication, and thereby the integration of the experience one information of the many, whereby the integrated information of many increase the capability of human at large to cope with exigencies of life. It is class 1 evolution that led, after progressive integration of total experience one information, to the unpredicted invention of writing or visual communication, by means of which the dead could speak to the living, and within which total written information history, human mind from time to time discovered repetitive patterns, which in turn sometimes led to the discovery of generalized scientific principles. Class 1 evolution has human fathers and mothers for multi-million of years serving as memory bank authority that showed children what they could safely eat and how to communicate. The parent told the children what they could or could not do to get along with the system into which they were born. The parent told the children what they should and should not believe. Instead of children, the parents were the authority. The myriad esoteric, illiterate ways in which the parent communicated to the children were parroted by the children. Thus were exoteric dialects proliferated. Thus were esoteric dialects proliferated until their many progressive deviations multiplied the many initially different world languages. It was class 1 evolution that in the mid-1920s discovered the world children and their parents, this way to the world children and their parents, that the voice coming over the radio had more up to the minute information regarding many more subjects than had the parents. The parents did not tell the children that the radio people had more authoritative information. It was self-evident to the children, who witnessed their parents running next door to the neighbors to tell them what the radio people had just told them.
Cool. Thanks, Joe, for getting us back to page 229. That's exactly the right place to start. There are other sections where he talks briefly about class 1, class 2, but I think right there is like the superbo definition. Any comments or questions on it? Anybody want to restate that in a way that means something to them, that's a little bit different wording, or is it good?
Class
Well,
2 evolution makes sense. Class 1 evolution makes money. No, class two evolution makes money.
Yeah, that's
class
right.
1 evolution makes sense.
Very good. I like that. Class 2 evolution was captured and class 1 evolution was free. Very cool. Any other comments or questions?
Class 1
Well,
evolution is transcendent.
Yeah.
It transcends generations.
Yeah.
Enables us to grow as humans.
Uh-huh. Beautiful. Pardon me while I take a moment. I'll be glad to. I think what I'm going to do is attach this to the thing I send out next week, and or after tonight with the recording, And I think that this is a really good summary. And oh shit, I just did the wrong thing. Sometimes I get ahead of myself with am I in? I want to be in the right section. Okay, there we go. There we go. Okay, good. I will attach that to the to our reading. So really good. So any other comments or questions on that?
I think also
Well, I'm
class
still kind of,
class two. Okay, yes, go on, Richard. I was just going to say quickly before Richard says that class two evolution does not do cosmic accounting. Does not account cosmic.
Right. That's a great way of putting it. It doesn't do it looks at actually it's the opposite of regenerative. It looks at only what can be extracted and not it's not intergenerational. I guess, you know, there's a term called intergenerational violence. And so from that perspective, it can be seen as that, and class one is the opposite. Where
Beautiful.
Let me ask Richard, you guys all the question. All right?
yeah,
If
I
you
mean,
take
I'm looking at it as class one being, if you want, tied to familial authority, family kind of authority and wisdom, and living, if you want, in harmony as best one can with the nature surroundings. In other words, it's kind of might even be an indigenous way of living. Class two seems to be one that is premised now on the technical evolution that says we can now conquer nature, we can exploit nature, we can put nature on her knees and take what we want from her. And so it's a way of living outside the respect for nature. That's kind of how I'm starting to think about it.
Yeah.
okay, let me make this comment. If you take the carbon, let's call it carbon civilization or the carbon era, right?
Yeah.
Or
Carbon in what sense?
yes, the hydrocarbon era. Our industrialization is based today on fossil fuels, basically. Now, was the fossil fuel, I mean, it is a fact that it is based on fossil fuel. How does that sit with regenerative? In other words, was the phase of going through fossil fuel use necessary to awareness of regenerative, or could it be part of a regenerative thing? I don't know if it makes sense what I'm saying.
it does to me.
Wow. This is so powerful.
So now what was being said, one of them's entropic and the other one's syntropic.
Right.
So say that again.
Class 1 evolution is syntropic,
Syntropic, okay.
and class 2 evolution is often entropically diseased.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, that kind of lines up with what I was saying. The one has to do with living with nature in harmony as best you can, but it's also avoiding, the weather conditions and avoiding predators and that sort of thing. So some could argue that it's survival of the fittest.
Right.
But it's a different kind of fitness, I think. And class 2 then is the exploitation of whatever is available. So it's entropic, it's tearing it down, it's doing it in. I just read a newspaper story today about a river in southern Alberta that has basically dried up, and now they have to drill for water.
And why is it dried up?
Because of overusage, probably redirection into irrigation
Sure.
and all those kinds of things where the water supply was just gobbled up and diverted from the mainstream of the river flow.
Yeah. This is how nature does it. We don't care. We're going to do it this way.
Yeah.
Then we
And
pay
so,
a price.
and nature says, fine, then I'll just dry up.
Right. And this is a big issue in Salt Lake right now. They're considering, Utah is making a major effort to clean up Salt Lake because Salt Lake's been drying up and it's turning into a toxic wasteland. And when the wind blows without the water there, there's all this toxic sand and dirt that blows into the city, and it's not healthy. And so by keeping that water up, then it keeps the ecology going, and the toxicity is cycled through in that natural system. And if, with the water gone, there isn't any. And right now, they were going to cancel the Olympics. Well, I don't know they were going to cancel, but Utah made a big promise to the International Olympic Committee to clean up that lake as a requisite for us being considered for the next Winter Olympics. I don't know if it's in 2030 or 2028 or whenever it is, but it's 5 years or so ahead of now. And we've got to clean up that lake. And there's a big conversation as to whether we'll have it cleaned up in time to meet that commitment. Class 2 is often entropically diseased. I love this. I was going to do a presentation on the Wednesday meeting about the ontology of profit. I've had this issue with profit and the way that the capitalism does it. You know, back in the 60s, we had this idea called conscious capitalism or compassionate capitalism. And then somehow that all went away. I've shared this before, but my band, my rock and roll band, played in a park in 1968. I think it was 1968 or so, where Tom Hayden from the Chicago Seven got out of prison and he came to Utah to present. And we were a bunch of hippies, and I just to the entire town of Provo boarded up from the park. The park stopped right at the edge of the commercial district, and so that commercial district from the park 3 or 4 blocks in had all plywood on the wood because they were just totally convinced there was going to be a riot in the street. Now, and I've told this before, but now I'm on a roll again. So in my church, I was in this rock and roll band. My 2-year-old son was playing drums up on the deal. I have a video of that. It's because some guy was making an experimental movie, 8mm, for his movie class at BYU. And there the cops were all surrounding the park with their billy clubs and their shields and everything, their riot gear and everything. And I was walking around with my son on my hip checking out the cops. And we hit a place there, and a guy yelled out and said, "Steve." And I looked over, and it was Sergeant Tidwell from the Provo Police Department, who happened to be a member of my church. And that we do a thing called home teaching. I was his home teacher. and he said, "Steve, how could you bring your 2-year-old son to a thing like this?" And I said to him, "Paul, how could you bring your billy club to a thing like this?" So anyway, there was no incident in the park, but I will tell you, when the concert was over and Tom Hayden left, the park was a complete mess. It was like all these hippies where they're protesting the institutions and wanting the institutions to go away, and they couldn't even pick up their own trash, leaving the trash for the city institution to clean up after themselves. And when I saw that, I saw the complete lack, the dissonance in the whole rhetoric with reality of human nature. It's like we like humans want type 2 evolution. They want institutions. They don't want the accountability. They want to blame somebody in something. Sorry for the rant, guys, but
there is something that you say very important, Steve.
yeah.
And I had that actually my mind, kind of getting into a word that come in there. You say conscious capitalism, right?
Yeah.
Okay, now read this.
Yeah.
What follows?
Yeah.
The drive to make money is inherently anthropic, for it seeks to monopolize order while living, what was the word, uncope with able.
Yeah.
That is consequences.
Yeah. It's
That
uncopable.
yes, that is pollution. Yes, what you are not coping with now.
Yeah.
All right, while
Yeah.
living that to overwhelm others.
Yeah.
So you don't. That's you didn't take into account that your activity has consequences. You violated the second principle of thermodynamics or something else like that. So you have an activity. That activity has leftovers that you don't cope with.
Mm.
And that leftover can be toxic to others. And you don't care about it. You leave it to overwhelm those, especially the most vulnerable. For example, a mining company come to a place and start extracting, but does not care about the details of mining, about chemical that are used, about washaways. Exploit their mining, make profit, and then move on.
Yeah.
And leave the populace that never actually benefited from the mining operation in the first place to cope with diseases. You have people who have children that are playing in dumps and they contract some kind of diseases that are not curable. We talk about, when was it, in Michigan, the water that was polluted in the
Yeah.
US?
Michigan.
It has nothing to do with the mining that took place. I mean, the mining that took place years ago is long gone.
Yeah.
But the poison is left, and the future generation, especially the young, the children, they absorb that. And it's really bad
And
for
it was
them.
exacerbated by the fact that they use lead pipes to run
Yes.
the water. And then in the rich neighborhoods, they fixed it, but in the poor neighborhood, they didn't fix it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
crazy.
So that word, maybe you have to highlight it, Steve.
Which one?
The one
This one here?
of class 2, for it seeks to multiply order while living on cope with able disorder. I think that is a very important word.
And to overwhelm others. Others are overwhelmed. We come back to the suicide conversation. There's no place for me here. And so I don't want to be here. There's no reason for me to be here. So it comes back, this overwhelming others with uncopable disorder. Uncopable disorder.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's where I'm now have adopted the language of gaslighting, and you get societal gaslighting at its best because it wants to get rid of you entropically, but it sets it up in a way in which you do it to yourself. So society can say it wasn't my fault. I never touched him.
Yeah.
I never told him or encouraged him to do that. It's all his psychological problem. Yeah,
It,
very manipulative sort of systems that we live in.
Yeah.
yeah.
This whole paragraph blows me away as I've been reading ahead. So I'll just say it now so we can read. In Utah right now, they're going to expand I-15 over here. To expand I-15, they're going to go from 6 lanes to 12 lanes. They're going to take a whole neighborhood over here and they're going to buy the houses at the market price, which is at the fair market price, and pay all these poor people. But when they have their full fair market price, there's no place else with real estate that cheap in the state of Utah. There's no place else. So they're going to give them money by using eminent domain. We're using this road. We're wiping out this community. We're going to give you market value for a property, and that value can't buy another property of equal livability. There's going to be nowhere for them to go. And so they're going to go into apartments, and all that family wealth that was built in that equity that could have been passed down to children will be gone because the state captured the ground, gave them market value, put them as rental families for the rest of generations. And then that money goes, and now they need to go on public assistance because they've spent their money on that they got from the sale of their equity on rent, and now they're impoverished. This boggles my mind.
Should we continue to read?
Yeah, please, let's continue to read. Thank you for being patient as I rant and rave.
Okay. Should I start from we must remember?
Yes.
We must remember that the majority of those convincedly committed to making money are motivated to do so primarily because of their mistaken conviction that there is fundamental external inadequacy of human life support on our planet. That has been true until yesterday. They were right until the syntropic class 1 evolutionary accelerating ephemeralization reached a point of doing so much more work with so much less effort because of the reduction in weights per strength ratios that we came 10 years ago to the point where we could, by proven design, take care of everyone at standard higher than any have ever known. In the vast majority of humans, there is an innate inclination, propensity, even drive to make sense and to produce order in consonance with universal order. The assumption by many humans that there is only entropic disorder seemingly present in the universe is brought about by looking only at the phases of energy separating out from any one system and not looking at the same disengaging energies always joining syntropically in the production of other systems. We will now consider all the ramifications of the about to be realized synergetic integration of all the objectives of the great half-century critical path. All the benefit needed for this synergetic fulfillment have been accomplished. See historical table of realized scientific and technical accomplishment, Appendix 1. The generalized principle calling for their inclusion in the critical path conceptioning of 50 years ago have been realized objectively in special case discoveries, inventions, or design taking place only during the last half century.
Okay, do we want to?
Yeah, I want to go up to sort of the second paragraph after at the point that Manu started to read there. It has to do with the I think it's in that paragraph, in the vast majority of humans, there's the assumption that there's only entropic disorder, and then it goes on and it talks about the same disengaging energies always join syntropically in the production of other systems.
Yeah.
And the reason that sort of struck me was discussions we've had about the sun's radiation is entropic, gets captured in the Earth's system, and it turns into syntropic progression or generation of living and wealth. Now, how do those two work together? Have I got it right in terms of what we're meaning there, in terms of that humans are only in tropic disorder, but there's something that comes together in a syntropic way out of that? How does that parallel with this idea that the sun's radiation is entropic and the photosynthesis, etc., in the earth is syntropic?
How do the natural elements work together, I guess? I mean, I'll just say the human aspect of it is the one part I can speak to is the innate inclination, propensity, and even drive to make sense. But go ahead. I know.
I'm just going to say at the scale of Richard talking about the sun entropic, the earth syntropic, and then we are entropic again. Because the photosynthesis captures the energy in the form of photons and then fixes it into things that we now eat, digest, and then disperse again.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's why Berkey says our function is that of information gatherer, winnower, storing, and transmitting. Because all of that is information.
Right. And that information allows us to make sense of the world. And I think that understanding that, how's that?
I would say our endeavor on this planet is because there's conscience. We're conscious, right?
Right.
We are conscious. If we are aware and conscious, we seek to live in harmony with that environment. Or by experience, we realize that the best way for us to sustain is to try to live in harmony. And I think that is the origin of the word anti-entropic that was coined in that word. Because our activity is normally, if less on its own, is entropic. But we seek to locally, anti-entropically convey and use energy in such a way that the pattern repeats and that it doesn't take us into oblivion. Say, for example, we destroy the structure of the atmosphere, our biosphere, we destroy it. We cannot survive. And where will be what we call we experience our consciousness? If we're part of a design, of a whole grand design. So if we don't, nation will do otherwise and discard us. We just disappear. Dinosaurs disappear. Nobody knows what they were thinking. Right?
Mm-hmm.
We may leave artifacts that maybe wouldn't mean anything to those beings that will succeed us. So we want to be, we are and we want to be part of a growing consciousness. I don't know else how to take it, but that's my limited understanding of what's being said here.
Gotcha.
Well,
Go ahead.
if it's just to pull it all together, I think that okay, we have the sun and the earth and the relationship between the two, and we're able to observe and start to understand how nature works. And that information, we're thinking consciously, and we're consciously thinking about it in terms of how to, and I think about this in terms of wisdom, is that many times is to minimize the negative impacts things, minimize harm on the environment we live in and the people we are around. So I look at this idea of energy and something, not to go too far off on a tangent, I was listening to something about the idea of frugality as being a virtue. And frugality being a virtue, meaning is that you're consciously thinking about what you're expending and what you're using. You're not wasting. And so this element of you're not wasting kind of leads to the idea of ephemeralization, which is in the second paragraph. And the idea you're doing more with less. So you're constantly not wasting. So you're using that feedback loop as a way of actually working in harmony with nature, not wasting any unnecessary resources. And then that's kind of where I was thinking with the whole idea of curiosity allows us to do all this too. Our natural curiosity. That's just,
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of looking at it now with just one of these high and low, or um, kind of up and down zigzags. So you the radiation from the sun down is entropic. Nature's photosynthesis is kind of in the upswing, syntropic. And then human beings have ignored this idea that they're here to protect
don't get
the.
their color from their plastic covers. And you can see that because
sorry.
here is a transmitter.
Go ahead.
Anyway, well, then nature's photosynthesis has us on a syntropic upswing. Man comes along and puts us on a entropic downswing, based on ownership and weaponry and that sort of thing. And so we're almost bottomed out. And if we swing upwards, it'll be away from weaponry and into livenry. We haven't made that turn yet, except in very small pockets, maybe around the world. So that's how I'm seeing it now. It's the down swing of sun's radiation entropically, the upswing through nature's photosynthesis, the downswing through weaponry and exploitation by humankind, and waiting for the livenry upswing to, in fact, have humans do the kind of thing that Bucky defined as our function, and that is to be those gatherers and problem solvers in the interest of protecting or maintaining the integrity of the regenerative universe. That's the picture that has been formulated in my head out of our readings in the past, but also more importantly this evening.
Yes.
So, for people right now to sort of say we're headed to hell in a handbasket, it's pretty much right on the button.
Yeah.
And we haven't yet turned the corner. And of course, if we believe Bucky, he says that, we'll go right up to the edge, the 11th hour and 59th minute before we will actually see the turn toward the Livenry upswing.
Yeah. I think he's about to talk about how he thinks all the problems have been solved and when he's writing this book and his frustration. I also believe that this whole concept of this whole concept is based on Darwinian survival of the fittest, this idea of natural selection. And this, came from the East India College, which became, did it become Cambridge University? It became Oxford University. Which one did it become? Cambridge is in Massachusetts, Oxford is in England, and it became, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, in order to get to whichever one it was or is, you really have to pause and think about the Malthusian notion of there's not enough to go around, and that all came out of that East India Company.
Right.
And it's, it's penetrated out throughout society ever since.
Right. And Malthus was a clergyman. Jeez.
Pox on him. I didn't know that. I
Yeah,
thought he was just an economist.
He was an Episcopal church uppity, and a professor at East India College. Yeah,
Yeah, he was the economics guy. Yeah.
Yeah. Crazy. I'm going to put because I'm going to put this link to the most misunderstood concept, entropy from Vertasium, because once again it explains how entropy is critical for life, and how the sun sends radiation down, and how syntropic the earth is, and how anti-entropic human beings are as we maintain our living. And then we radiate this heat and do this waste that goes back into the system. And it seems to me, I'm going to plug that in out to you guys right now. Again, I put it there last night. But it seems to me that this concept that I've highlighted here, I think you see it. The assumption by humans that there is only I got stuff in the way here. That there is only entropic disorder seemingly present in universe is brought about by looking only at the phases of energy separating out from any one system, and not by looking at the same disengaging energies always joining syntropically in the production of other systems. In other words, there is nothing left over. Oh, well, this is left over. This is my profit. So I put it in the bank, right? No, he's saying nothing is left over. Nothing is left over. It's syntropically used in the production of other systems.
It's working in harmony.
Go ahead.
It's working in harmony with.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's essential. How do yeah, and how do we create something of value for not ourselves but others?
Yeah.
And I think in that sense, and within the ecosystem that we live in, so that's expanding the moral circle.
Yeah.
And yeah. Anyway.
Well, I think, I mean, to me, it's really, you're putting your finger on this idea that we think it's all entropic, so we might as well sort of steal what we can and get the hell out of here and make sure that the other guy doesn't get very much of that. But we fail to see that systems are already syntropically forming other systems or new systems. So in that sense, he's making the case that we'll never run it down to zero. We'll never run it, out of gas. because they're the disengaging sort of energies are working together syntropically to bounce back. I had a very, I don't know if this fits, but I was in a group and I had my tetrahedron model, the tensegrity model, which is flexible and got firm dowels on it. And I was passing it around and we had people, I was basically saying, so what do you think of this? What does it say to you? What does it mean to you? And some people took it seriously and others said, oh, it's just a bunch of sticks and elastics. And they could, I asked them to play with it. Well, it so happened that they played with it so that it was kind of pulled apart. It was kind of in a mid state, if you want. And it got to one guy, and these are all colleagues of mine, and we're in a conference where, you know, you're respectful of the teacher or the facilitator, and I was the facilitator. So somehow or another, when he saw that model being passed around, and when it got to him, and I said, so what does it kind of say to you? And he said, it says, I hate the model. I hate it. And in saying those words, he also, his whole body reacted or acted, and he picked up his feet and he stomped on the model, and he crushed it right down to the floor. And the audience, 50, 60 people, were horrified. And so was he, I think, the fact that he actually did this in public. And so he took his foot off and the model bounced back. And I don't know whether that's an example of entropic sort of disorder, finding a way to bounce back after it had been stomped on.
It's just
The stomping on is class 2. Class 2 action. But ultimately, you know, the principle will prevail.
Yeah. I think Bucky speaks a little bit optimistically. Here he says, all the artifacts needed for synergetic fulfillment have been accomplished. I think that could be a little bit narcissistic or a little bit presumptuous. But I think if we look at history and we look at YouTube and we look at the garage guy, you know, the guy in the garage that Bill Gates said, I'm not worried about a big corporation kicking my butt. I'm worried about the guy in the garage. And now with the advent of AI, it's even more important. And there's a big conversation about how about the open structured AI and how they're actually building compiled units of this AI that can actually be loaded onto your computer so that you have your AI on your computer to do your thing. And you no longer need to rely on any institution. So while all artifacts needed for synergetic fulfillment have been accomplished, Bucky would look at what's going on right now and he would probably have trouble breathing looking at how things are becoming so we're in the face of intense hegemonies and oligarchies and plutocracies, and at the same time we're looking at a democratization that's never been had before.
But Steve, there's one caveat.
Yeah.
What Bucky was talking about there that has been done is prototyping.
Yeah.
Or like his dimension car, like all of these things.
Yeah.
Like the housing.
And housing.
Yes, it's been prototyped. But what is brought about to the what we call democratization of use to the masses is something very different.
Yeah.
Right? So we have applying principles, build artifacts that can hold regeneratively. But the choices that we make of what to use is captured. And if I'm capturing, if I'm in the making money only, thing, I'm going to capture what suits my short-sighted interest, right? And nothing else. So to me, we should be a little bit, it's not far off. What we're seeing today in the public is not all that is possible to be done, or is not the choices that there could have been other choices of things that already prototypically exist that will result in a significantly different experience from the one that we're having now. Does it make sense?
The
Well, yeah.
I'm just always wondering if there were all the research probably exists to lay cables to transport energy around the world, like we're doing with fiber.
with what?
Fiber.
Fiber.
Yeah. You have these cables. I don't know which composite material we use to transport energy, probably electricity, with least losses around the world.
Yeah. And then we have Starlink with no cables.
Yeah.
Okay.
But Starlink is an application on the information. It's not going to carry the basic energy to Steve's, to your cave now, to where you are.
Oh,
You
okay.
see what I mean?
Yeah.
So we need to, information has been, because I think that people realize that people can more manipulable, or they can be moved with energy, with information, data. But the other part of it that is much more physical, like electricity and things like that, is still completely enclosed to countries or even to municipalities. And that's an issue.
Very big issue.
If there is interconnection worldwide, I think that there will be a lot of change. You start seeing the globe as one illuminated, interconnected, place.
And now, Manu, they're talking about fusion. It's supposed to be functioning within the next 5 years. Of course, it's always been in the next 5 years for the last 15 years, but there are people who are pretty confident about it. And if we come to fusion technology, any one of us can have a battery pack that we put in our back pocket, and we'll have all the power we need. And all we got to do is capture. I don't know. So there's great hope and great overwhelm going on simultaneously.
Absolutely.
Are we ready to read?
Sure.
Is it your turn, Joe?
Sure. It is a fact that we can now technologically recover and sort out the valuable chemistries in all the chimney escaping or sleuthway escaping wastes, which, though unwanted by the local manufacturers, are necessary chemical element components in the overall syntropic success of eternal regeneration of universe. Nature has no pollutions. It has very valuable chemistries that function only under special conditions. So critical path strategy is to get all the money maker unwanted chemistries shunted into all their syntropically functioning routes. Pollution is simply energy in the form of unfamiliar matter, which the timing of the regenerative cosmic system cannot immediately use, but must use later. We will now seek for the causes and solution of smog as a special case entropic problem. whose solution, however, leads to understanding of how many other such problems will be solved. We have places on our planet, like Los Angeles, that are world famous for what is called smog. With the Earth revolving from the west to east, the morning sun heats the eastern slopes of mountains. In the afternoon, it heats the western slopes as the eastern slopes cool off. The northern hemisphere's prevailing winds are being sucked from the northwest highs by low pressure areas of the tropics in a southeast direction for the northern hemisphere observer, which phenomena we must misidentify as northwest winds. They are in reality southeast drafts. These prevailing southeast drafts dominate the environmental conditions of the 90% of humanity living north of the equator. The majority of our planet's moist life support land is also north of the equator. From the vast experiences of the North Pacific, cool airs of the evening impinge upon the warm western slopes of all the Pacific Islands and upon the west coast mountains of the United States. In the 1950s, physics discovered that temperature differentials are equivalent to electrical potential differentials, and that what we have been calling condensation into water of vapor is, in fact, electrolytic formation of atoms into water molecules. We have heating on one side of the mountains and cooling on the other. This produces an electric potential differential between the eastern and western slopes, as well as between the warm western slopes and the cool Pacific Ocean air.
Wow.
Since what we have used to call condensation of moisture is in fact electrolytic fixation, the low floating west coast mist clouds of California are produced by the cool airs impinging on the warm mountainside, bringing about electric potential differential and electrolytic fixation, which produces those lovely mists riding the western mountain slopes, particularly of Southern California, but also of the western slopes of all the mountain Pacific Islands.
You know what? I was just doing a study on clouds and snow and mist, and all those articles said that mist is formed from dust particles. And I'd be very interested in having some chemist, weather guy, meteorologist, tell me about the relationship of this electrolytic function that Bucky just described, and if dust is actually needed in this process. But Bucky doesn't say dust, even though dust might be considered pollution from some aspect, and he says there is no pollution, that everything is used in another system. It would have been prime for him to say dust is part of this electrolytic process, but he doesn't say that. So I think that's kind of interesting right here about electrolytic fixation. Any other comments or questions?
I mean, I had no idea about this process what we've been calling condensation is the formation of atoms into water molecules. I must admit I was pretty ignorant to that.
I wish we could have a scientist argue this point for us. Any other comments or questions? I just really thought that this one statement up where he said there's no pollution. Where did he say that? There's no pollution. It is a fact. There it is. Nature has no pollution.
Yeah. I saw that and then he goes through the critical path of strategy to get all the money making unwanted chemistries shunted into their syntropically functioning roots, money maker chemistries. And that's an important line. Meaning the unwanted chemistry.
Yeah.
Which means, this idea that we're no longer well, if it's unwanted chemistry, it's not syntropic, right?
Well, it's unwanted for the moneymakers.
Right, right. Oh, well, wait a minute. Shunted into all their syntropically functioned roots. Okay, all right, forgive me. It's
If I put
going
this
into
together,
their, it's
it's
going into the, yeah,
moneymaker unwanted chemistries. That hyphen he's hard to read.
yeah, no, forgive me. Then, because it's going into the syntropically roots. Okay.
Right.
Sorry about that.
Well, oops, sheet. Okay, good. There's nothing to be sorry about. Lucky's hard to read. Any other insights coming to you on this? Now I forgot where we left off.
Keep going there.
It was Pacific Ocean Air, right?
The Pacific Islands.
Oh, Pacific. Thank you. Yeah, we left to the bottom page. Any other comments or questions?
No.
All right, Richard, do you want to read?
Yeah,
Or where's my
starting
turn?
where? Next?
Yeah, we next observe.
We next observe the great 20th century influx of industry onto the California coast. Overnight settlements became towns and towns became cities, each with its own chamber of commerce doing its best to attract ever more industry. In order to pay for town governments, taxes are necessary. In order to pay political obligations, the elected town administrators need money to hire people to carry out all the legislatively conceived tasks. Some of them necessary, many of them unnecessary, but all requiring large sums of money. The Los Angeles Chamber of Commerce and the Los Angeles government did everything they could to invite industry to move into their domain because industries produce the greatest amount of taxable money making. Industries also produce jobs and therefore in turn wages that can be taxed. Los Angeles did everything it could to attract industries and businesses. Having many locally occurring petroleum wells, one of the most logical of industries brought into Los Angeles was that of oil drilling, pumping, refining, storage, and shipping, such as those of the concentrated operations of the oil fields and harbor areas of Los Angeles, Long Beach. Los Angeles built a vast number of huge refineries in the southwest part of the city. And on its southeastern side, Los Angeles positioned its steel mills to satisfy the large demand for steel products in the building of the oil refineries, their storage tanks, and pipelines. The fumes from these industries then loaded the mist and the warm airs and the sun-exposed upper cloud surfaces, and their shaded lower surfaces produce temperature differentials, which in turn produce layer inversion with the fumes locked in on the underside, which then acted as a widespread lower atmosphere lid, holding the industrial gases and fumes close to the ground throughout the whole Los Angeles area. Thus, smog became an industrially produced phenomena.
Can we pause there
Yeah.
just for a little second?
Mm-hmm.
I lived in LA. I lived in Inglewood. I actually lived in North Long Beach for a time later on after I got married. When I was living in California as going to junior high school, like in 1959, there was a big public bond being promoted in Los Angeles because so much oil had been pumped out of underneath Long Beach. Long Beach was sinking. And they'd made a proposal to pump water and other stuff. I don't know what they were pumping in back into the aquifers and back into the oil reserve areas to be able to jack Long Beach back up so it didn't sink into the ocean. Isn't that something?
Well, let me tell you a bit of a story on that as well. When we were asked to come to California and do suicide intervention training throughout the whole state. And we were developing what was emerging into a social enterprise. In other words, it was not a nonprofit charitable organization. So we cased California. And I don't know if we read what we just read, but something along that line came out of our study that said Californians love business. They love the idea that one might be able to go out on their own. So when we did our pitch to governments or statewide stakeholders, that's what we were doing, is sort of saying, you want to buy into this because not only are you going to get training, but some of you could turn it into your own little enterprise and make a living for yourself. And as we were doing that, there was a funny feeling in the audience that we were picking up that we didn't understand what it was. And so at break time, we sort of caucused and said, what the hell's going on out there? There's something funny happening. So one of our guys who was sort of a group home leader, he says, well, we'll solve it. Soon as we go back out into the meeting, I'll stop and say, there's something going on in here. What is it? And so the answer came back and said, we've got enough snake oil salesmen in California already. We don't need another one. So your pitch is not going over very well. So we learned not to believe Bucky in terms of the culture of California.
Wow.
Wow. I'll just maybe, just add one thing really quickly. Sometimes I'm reading this and I'm thinking to myself, to a certain extent, I guess people thought they were doing the right thing, right? Bringing these businesses to town and jobs. People were looking for jobs, and obviously it wasn't a good idea the way it was being done. But, I start to think about it in terms of comprehensive solutions. And and how sure can we be we have the answers now, and we can't. We're trying, but comprehensive solutions, I guess, entail so much more than just business. It involves, there's nothing about, there's talking about the Chamber of Commerce, but nothing about community. Certainly nothing about education. And I'm just thinking that without those factors, then it's really not a comprehensive solution. And it can go badly in a number of ways. And that's kind of a ramp. The other part is just that, I don't know, to kind of look back with some compassion. Because, they probably thought they were doing the right thing.
Joe, I think that practically one of the prerequisites that will make this thing kind of adopted is that in the framework, for example, they take the city government, municipal government, and things like that.
Yeah.
They should in the convention that they enter with corporations to set up operation, make the framework of responsibility large, long. To say, for example, when Bucky says we have to start from the macro inclusive, the notion of macro inclusive is not only the things that can happen, but the time within which they can happen. In other words, we can think about all the stuff that we want, but if the responsibility of a corporation, of an entity, is not valid legally enough for the corporation to bear the consequences, say 20 years later, it's not going to work. Because most of the time, the public company has been dissolved.
Right.
A company come into an area, carry an operation. It is a listed public company that is listed somewhere, and the profit are extracted. And once those profits finish extracting, the company dissolves. Who is responsible?
Yeah. Yeah.
Pretty good.
So practically, again, Joe, it comes in the form of something that seems to be inefficient, but some taxation into some fund that is not used currently, but that can provide resources to do repairs in the absence of the actual company being there. So instead of distributing all the leftovers
Yeah.
to the so-called owners,
Yeah.
those who are holders of stock, there's a tax on it, and that tax is levied and is put in a fund. Now the question is also who administers the fund. Is it
Yeah.
going to be safe enough with the
Right.
expediency of political systems and all this stuff? That's where it has to be something that is now, the fund is now a public fund. When I say public, it means that the
Like
local
normal.
communities have appointed trustees that look after the interests attached to those funds.
Rather than
The
politics.
time comes, the amount that have been accounted for and accumulated can be spent on trying to do some remediation of the consequences of activities of the corporations.
Yeah, that's a big problem. And it's over and over again. The guy makes his profit, goes out of business, and the public pays for it. And all you got to do is look at the bank crash of 2008. And right in the people's face. Nobody goes to prison, and the people bail out the thing. It's mind-boggling. Let's finish this last paragraph on this page, and then we'll do our summary up. You want to continue, Joe? Was it you reading, or who was reading? Richard. Want to finish off that last one, or you want me to read it?
No, it's okay.
Right at the top.
Oh, right, yeah. So Los Angeles's citizens became politically articulate about this air pollution and went to their city government saying, we mustn't have this in our city. The city government then went into the utilities, the refineries, and the steel manufacturers and said, stop putting your smog-producing fumes into our city, our sky. We've looked into the situation and find there exists equipment that makes it possible to precipitate that fume. But you don't have that equipment. The companies responded, if we put in that fume precipitation equipment, it'll cost us so much more to produce here in LA than it does companies producing in places that don't have such controls, that we won't be able to compete in our industry. We'll be forced out of business. So we're either going to have to cut out this nonsense about fume precipitation or move out of your city. The municipal government said, for heaven's sake, don't leave. Your tax base is essential to our political survival. We're politicians. We'll fix it up in some other way.
Oh, good
So,
grief.
yeah.
Did you stop, Steve? Soon
Yeah.
after?
Yeah, that's the end of the paragraph, and we're approaching our
Yeah, but
zero over here.
it was exactly the same. I mean, just four. I think that it should, the following paragraph followed in what he was saying. Not even follow is part of it.
Yeah.
If you can just put it up a little bit, and then we'll look at it, have a peek, and then we see what it
You
is.
want to look at another piece? Okay, hang on a second. I'll find that. Here we go.
Yeah, I think that paragraph, soon thereafter, Los Angeles made the
All
following
right,
pronouncement.
let's start there. Let's finish that last paragraph. Good point. And we'll start here next week.
Yeah.
Because then he changes topic. So let's finish that.
Okay, soon thereafter,
Yeah.
the LA city government made the following pronouncement. People, the smog is your fault.
Yeah.
Nice gas lighting. It's your backyard incinerators that are producing this smog. The people said, sure enough, we're incinerating in Los Angeles. We are in the wrong. We must stop incinerating. So a law was passed saying that nobody could incinerate within city limits. The people did not stop incinerating, and the smog abated. Well, the people did stop incinerating, and the smog abated, but only in minor degree. The real offender was the industrial fumes. Along came World War II, and the issue was buried under more immediate pressing matters.
Very cool. And then we'll start here next time. Because we start World War II. Is that cool, Manu? Is there any point you want to make off of that?
Yeah, that was the only point.
Yeah, I'm glad you did. That was pretty
Yeah.
good. So this would be March 2nd.
Interesting.
All righty. I guess that we're
Oh boy. Do you see the parallel in the US political system?
sure.
If we wait it out long enough, it'll go away. Something will come in and get rid of the problem for certain people. Right now, it's counting on getting close enough to an election that litigations will have to stop.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's so sad it's almost comical.
Yeah.
Because that's exactly what's going on. And there are big discussion here in the US about how fast these trials can proceed and exactly what the relationship between the trials are, and how there's so many trials going on with Trump. They got actually a couple of the judges are actually coordinating because they're both federal offenses, and he can't be in two courts at one time. And this helps prolong the whole thing. We're just in such a sad state of affairs in those regards. But there is a movement going on. There are people that are standing up for Nikki Haley's losing amazingly. I mean, was the election today in South Carolina? I think
Yeah.
it was today. So we're going to hear results as to where Nikki Haley came. So far, she's 40 points behind Trump in her own state.
She got wiped out.
She did get wiped out because you've seen the results.
But did she not bail out of election, Nikki?
No, she's going to stay until March 6th after the big Tuesday. She's going to stay in to let all the major Republican primaries happen to see if she can stay in there. I have trouble believing the U.S. population is so honkin' hoodwinked. We're just hoodwinked. I could go on a rant about that because I've actually dealt with Trump University. He had a $25 million fine over Trump University. I actually went to the Trump University organization, which, by the way, was in name only. A friend of mine paid him $1 million to use his name on Trump University, and then paid him a royalty every month. And the thing was so screwed up, and everybody knew it. And I actually flew into back east to sit in a meeting to say, "Look, I can help you guys with this Trump University. We can pull your head out of your butt, and let's give these people something of value." Nobody was interested in doing that. And he ended up with a $25 million fine over that fraud of Trump University. And now he has what does he have now? He has 250 million, I think it's 150 million plus interest or something for a bond that he has to post in order to appeal his felony charges in New York. And Americans continue to vote for the guy. My good grief. Okay. Richard, how are you feeling? What's your takeaway today? Oh, geez.
I feel good living in Canada.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
And how,
Um,
what's your
well,
takeaway?
anyway, but I mean, what I'm taking away is really a clearer a picture understanding of the entropic syntropic sort of connection and flow, and how one comes in and goes out the other, and then another one can take you down the entropic road, and we're looking for that turning point to take us on the upswing again in more of a syntropic sort of environment and way of living, and it just feels to me like um, we're living in the good and the bad. I am anyway, because I mean I'm a 50s kid that could do anything. Um, you could walk into any town and you could take your pick of 7 or 8 jobs. Uh, and this idea that you had to be screened and refereed and letters of reference, they just eyeballed you. If they thought you were the kind of person they wanted, you got hired. And now I'm to some extent living in the worst of times too, because we're deep into that entropic downswing, and I don't think I'll ever see the real upswing into living. There's tidbits of it, but not in a big sense. Um, and I'm just waiting for 2 more years to take the paper that my students and I wrote in 1988 and just see how completely off base we were in predicting that our field would buy into Bucky Fuller by the turn of the century and everything would be in dreamland by 2026. Utopia. So anyway, I really value the the better feel I have now for syntropic, entropic, syntropic, entropic, syntropic sort of zigzag, the crest and the dive. So thank you. That's it just proves again that a collective reading of something you may well have read more than once in the past comes alive in a way that it won't come alive when it's just you reading and trying to make sense of the page. So thank you all. So I'll over to Manu. How are you feeling, and what is your takeaway today?
I feel grateful. I feel thankful. I think that today we really touch about problems and issues that are very, very current and very weighing in today's. And to have the experience of Steve and you, Richard, is very, very instructive. One powerful thing that I take away though is the robustness of, I will call it the provision from the results of today to cater for tomorrow. We might not know what is tomorrow, but if from the results of our great de-exploitation of today, something was forced out not to be distributed and accumulated in a certain way, in a kind of granary that can be used for whatever that is really needed, it will be important. It is something. The second lesson that I get is the value of real education, experimentation, and lessons in order today, in order to tackle tomorrow. I reckon that I'm limited, I'm unable, or we as communities cannot predict the future, but we can do our best into learning about what is revealed to us by really taking it to heart to record it and to request to it for guidance and to be open, to be flexible, and to provision from our actions today for the sake of tomorrow. And that tomorrow is our tomorrow, not somebody else's tomorrow. That's the biggest lesson I take from here. Otherwise, thank you all. Joe, how do you feel? What do you take away?
I feel great. And I agree. Going through this together, there's just something that's special about that. Having so many different insights that that I couldn't possibly have on my own. So I'm very, very grateful for that. It's very good to be back as well. After missing a couple of sessions. And so I feel like I have a stronger understanding of class 1 and class 2. And that's something that we can discuss in many different ways. And I think that understanding the importance of responsibilities that we have, not only to ourselves, but to future generations, is essential and needs to be in our consciousness. And so and that's class 1 evolution. It's not just worrying about our particular generation or what we need at this particular moment in time. Oh. And there was also one other point that had to do with our just discussion around the cycle, and I actually started with essentially Richard's comment, and this goes back to this our relationship with nature. There really is a movement that wants to dominate nature, and they'll say it, and it generally comes out of Silicon Valley. I'm not trying to pinpoint anybody, but and they think that that's a path forward, and I don't know, that to me just seems odd, and I think that it's important to show people a better path, and I think that that's what Bucky tried to do with his entire life. So hopefully people try and think of terms in synergy as opposed to a dominating perspective on the world. Okay, so those are my takeaways. Yeah, really quickly, this whole idea of breaking things, that's one of the things they talk about all the time when they talk about dominating with nature. Anyway, Steve, how do you feel? What are you taking away from today?
Well, I too am grateful for everybody being here. I mean, I'm sitting here thinking, well, what if we had 30 people on this call? And what would come to me is that I would, if I were leading it, I would pick 3 or 4 people to be on a panel to have the discussion we're having, find out, like, we're going to be talking about suicide or pollution or whatever, and call on people to be on that panel. And then we present, the 4 people would discuss it. Then we break into small groups. And if there are 35 people there'd be like 8 small groups, 4 people on a group, let them talk in their small groups, then have them come back in and present what their small group found, in case that group found something that the panel had missed, and at least give everybody a chance to participate. we probably wouldn't move quite as quickly as we're moving, but I think that would be the way to do it. I don't know. That just came to me. So I'm grateful, Joe, for that you brought us. I was going to go at page 279 or something, and you brought me back to page 276 or something, because those definitions that we had read earlier and I highlighted and read were just absolutely perfect. And if I hadn't gone back that far, I wouldn't have seen that. So I'm just really grateful for everybody's contribution to this thing. The the one thing that seems to be going for me is this idea that in nature there's no pollution. So, if I see pollution, if I see something left over, the question I can ask myself is, what am I missing? Not, oh boy, I get to keep this, or oh boy, I'm going to put this in somebody else's backyard. And my final takeaway, I'm so glad I remembered it, is that I'm really hopeful about the planet. I think things are going to hell in a handbasket at rapid fire nature. But I come back to this idea of what Ray Kurzweil talked about and what has been referred to commonly as Moore's law, and I think more appropriately as Wright's law. But Kurzweil talks about this exponential growth. The fact that we are growing at orders of magnitude. We're not moving incrementally. We're not moving arithmetically. Our problems are not getting worse. 1 + 1 = 2 + 1 = 3. Our thing is getting worse. 1 + 1 is 2, and then 2 squared is 4, and 4 squared is 16. And I think that our solutions are coming as rapidly as our problems. AI is going to solve a lot of problems. Because we're growing at at this extremely rapid rate that exceeds my understanding, and that gives me hope. I don't know, maybe I'm a little bit crazy. But I'm loving this conversation. I appreciate every one of your inputs, and we've landed the plane at a minute after the appointed time, so that's a wonderful thing. Any other comments or questions before we go?
If we are growing, things are coming up, as you say, exponentially, but the means of appropriations are also coming up exponentially. Think about central bank digital currency. You understand what I'm trying to say?
To some degree, yeah.
Yeah, it always come back to consciousness,
Yeah.
the choice. What
Yeah.
do we do as a community of humans?
Right.
Are we going to choose for something that is in the best interest of humans and other beings, or are we going to be restricting it to the narrow and selfish interests of a few?
Right. And it comes back to the Bucky's point here at the beginning. If I'm in overwhelm, I don't think I have a choice, or what's worse, I don't think I belong here. And that overwhelm can be desperate. Yeah. So, any other comments or questions? Okay.
So next week we start with when World War II was over.
Exactly. We're going to start it when World War II. So we get to move to bigger and better things.
All right.
Thanks,
I'll
Kyle.
tell you, I feel there is such a lack of education out there with the young people today as to history and how we got where we got. So I'm looking forward to next week. Thank you all.
Me too.
All right.
Take care, guys.
Bye-bye.